I wanted to investigate what was that about? What was that era, that almost 100 years of legally segregated schooling that we had in the United States from the Civil War up until Brown versus Board of Education. And therefore, I went on that pursuit. And that's the battle for the Black mind. It's our um, freedom struggle through education. And I wanted to retell some of those stories about what that's meant to us.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Class is in Session. I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and this show on Black Enterprise highlights the latest happenings inside HBCU classrooms. We also look at public policy issues affecting these historic institutions. We shine a light on HBCU students, leaders, and alums who are making major moves in business, the arts, and education. And we touch on relevant topics that are important to our audience here at Black Enterprise, thus taking you to class. Today, as an NAACP award-winning author, sociologist, and professor, Dr. Karida Brown's expertise lies in two areas: studying how systemic racism works and exploring the rich history and culture of Black life. As she describes in her new book, The Battle for the Black Mind has been an ongoing Cold War for control over the narrative, values, and future of Black education. So today, we're delighted to have Dr. Karida Brown here to discuss her book, The Battle for the Black Mind, and its historical account of the struggle for educational justice in America. Hello and welcome, Karida.
Hello, Ashley. It is so good to be here in conversation with you today.
I'm delighted as well. I absolutely am, because you are on the move right now. Are you currently traveling to, promote and talk about your book? It sounds like you are all over the place, but doing good things while you're doing it.
I am. I'm on the road, but it is a true blessing to be walking in your purpose. The book came out for such a time as this. So it is important for me to be out in the streets, in community, having these discussions. So happy to do it.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's backtrack and find out a little bit more about you and what you do. Tell us about your role as a professor and a leading scholar of systemic racism and Black culture.
I am a professor of sociology at Emory University, where I teach all the courses on systemic racism in my department. I teach courses at the undergraduate and graduate level that help students really um, develop a systematic approach to understanding the complexities of not only how racism works, but the whole system of what we call racial capitalism, right? And putting that into global context and at the local interpersonal level. So it's important work, purposeful work, and it just brings me great meaning. But in addition, Ashley, and I
Hmm.
always have to make this distinction, you know, while the study of racism overlaps many times with the Black experience, that's not what the all that's to it with the Black experience, and that's why I
Yeah.
say I have 2 areas of research, and the one that is my wellspring of joy is that, the study of Black history and culture, so I get to do a little bit of both in my role as a professor.
Got it. And thank you for sharing that. The distinction that, listen, we our Black life, culture, history, and our joy does not always have to be tied to systemic racism and our oppression as well, that they can be independent. And I'm curious to know, when did you discover your passion for the study and the learning about Black history, Black culture, Black life?
I can say without a doubt that that started in my household with my parents, Richard and Arnita Brown, who, without without being explicit with me or my brother about what they were doing, we were just steeped in our culture and a love for our culture. So whether that was through, there was always Black music playing in the house, through our foodways and, incorporating us as children into those practices in taking us back home. So for them, for my family, we come from a long line of coal miners from the Appalachian Mountains. So growing up in New York, we'd always go home at least 2 or 3 times a year. So those connections with my roots and not only who we are, but where we've been, what we've been through and where we come from has just been something that was a part of the way my parents chose to raise me and my brother. It really didn't come from there wasn't a lot of when I think about it, book learning on that.
Mhm.
That would take place in school. My parents just they were just about that life, and that's where
Yeah.
that was my origin point. But I meandered. I got my undergraduate degree in business, risk management and insurance to be, specific. I worked on Wall Street for, um, almost, for 7 years of my career right out of college, and I didn't really think much about these issues, these systemic issues. I didn't really think much about what it meant to be a Black woman in corporate America in high finance. Um, it wasn't until the financial crisis of 2008 when I
Hmm.
really had to take stock of where my values lie. Was my profession purposeful or was I just out there making money? Why I had to ask myself that question is because I worked for AIG, and if you recall, if you were there in 2008, AIG took that $85 billion bailout. So there was a direct we were complicit in the global financial crisis, and that's the long way to tell the story that I quit on that day, September 15th, 2008. I made a decision that I wanted to make more than money, I wanted to make a difference. I applied to grad school. I got a master's first and then went on to the PhD, and wanted to dedicate my life to being an educator.
Wow,
And I
that's
and
powerful.
I wanted to
Mhm.
teach about us.
You wanted to teach about us. Because I'm glad that you shared that because I was so curious to learn how you made a pivot from the financial world, the top of the financial world with that on Wall Street to studying about us and our people.
Yes,
Wow. Wow. That
and
is
I've
incredibly
I've never
Mhm.
looked back a day in my life. I've never regretted it.
That's awesome.
Mm.
That's a blessing that you have not had regrets about it. That's a big deal. And kudos to you for taking that bet on yourself and really going for what you felt like what your purpose was and staying true to your integrity. At a time when those were trying times. I remember the recession around that time. I was in state government and
Yes.
the buyouts, the bailouts were happening. Teachers were being laid off. It was a tough time.
Now and can
And
you
so for
imagine
Mhm.
quitting your job during a time like that? So it you know,
Yeah.
my my family was not happy about that, but, we've come full circle on it now. There was a master plan, but yeah, that was a decision that was really important, and what that taught me as a young professional was, like you say, bet on yourself and choose. It's one thing to let life happen to you, let your career happen to you. It's a different thing when you make a choice and one that has, risks associated with it, like, it coulda not worked out, and that gave me everlasting assuredness and confidence that I can do this, whatever that is that I'm putting my mind to, and there's something greater out there than just the scripts of or pathways of success that we're told are the safe ones.
You're correct. So many more paths than what we are told are the safe ones. Speaking of paths, I want to get into the path of you writing this book. Why this book, The Battle for the Black Mind, and why now? And I really
Mm,
wanted to know why it was important for you to devote, I believe, 10 years of research
yeah,
to this
almost.
book. Why was it
Yes.
important to you?
Because this is a part of a continuation of my own family story. My mother and father were children of the Jim Crow South, which means that they lived in a segregated community. They attended what were called colored schools. And because of that, they were subjected to an education that was designed to be not only separate and unequal, but the intention for that education was for it to also be inferior to the education that the white kids got at the white school. Now, actually, that is absolutely not what happened in my parents' black school in their town. They had all of these, they would always share with me these amazing stories about their teachers and how brilliant they were and what an excellent education that they had. Not only just learning reading, writing, and arithmetic, but developing their character and their self-esteem. And that those two stories don't align, you know? So I wanted to investigate, what was that about? What was that era, that almost 100 years of segregated, legally segregated schooling that we had in the United States from the Civil War up until Brown versus Board of Education. And therefore, I went on that pursuit. And that's the battle for the Black mind. It's our um, freedom struggle through education. And I wanted to retell some of those stories about what that's meant to us.
Our freedom story through education, and you've captured it. I learned a lot, and again to the audience, just pardon all my post-it notes hanging out. Just disregard that because, I'm a native of South Carolina, and obviously, my parents as well went to segregated schools. Even long after Brown v. Board, schools did not integrate until my parents were nearing the completion of high school in the early
Mhm.
70s. Things were unequal for quite some time.
That's
And
right.
I found this interesting because Augusta, Georgia, is, one of our neighboring, um, cities in South Carolina. And you talked about Ware High School was the first public high school for African Americans in Georgia, founded in Augusta in 1880. Unlike most segregated public schools in the South that were forced to adopt a curriculum that mirrored the Hampton Tuskegee model of an industrial education, Ware High School embraced a liberal education model, and that was a defiance of the norms. But obviously, after anti-Black racism came, the school was forced to close its doors. Meanwhile, Black families were pouring their tax dollars into white schools, but not their own. In this way, Black Augustans were forced into participating in their own oppression. I
Mm,
thought that was heavy. And I wanted to talk about how we correlate what happened to where to literally where we are today.
mm.
That how are we funding, into educational systems that sometimes our children are not able to get into schools or have access to schools that may be best serving them and offering, true, like you said, educational justice. Can we kind of correlate the Ware High School example with where we are today?
Yeah, and I mean, it so many points in this book, it just makes me feel like I'm writing about the 1800s and early 1900s, but boy, does this rhyme. Boy, this, these lessons are instructive for today. So let me just take you back really quickly to that time period, 1880, when Ware High School opened its doors. This is, right after the fall of Reconstruction. So this is the period where Jim Crow laws start to flood the state legislatures across the South. So you have laws about restricting Black folks from having access to the fullness of national life in every arena, not just education, but how we had access to public space, banking, where we could live, every manner of life. So but yet we're citizens. We're paying into a tax system. And what the fall of Reconstruction did, or the rallying cry under which it was ushered in, was under a call to go back to states' rights. This is what Southern legislatures were calling for, states' rights. And I want you all to hold this now. Well, states' rights to do what and to whom? When Reconstruction fell, what that meant was it was up to a board of education, how those tax dollars would be allocated in between Black and white schools. And what ended up happening was many boards of education just said, what do those African Americans need any school for anyway? What do they need to go to high school for anyway? So in the case of Ware, the Richmond County Board of Education, on their own whim and fancy, decided to shut down the only Black public high school in the city of Augusta. So when we think about Project 2025, Chapter 11 of that 900-page document is about their plan for education, right? If you just read the first 2 pages of that chapter, and it's free and online, so I encourage you all just to peruse that. What are they calling for? States' rights, to go back to states' rights and move to a mass privatization of the education system. I wanna remind you all that we've seen this before, y'all. It is the same playbook. That's just one of many examples of how Black education was systematically underdeveloped and underfunded at the state, local, and national level, under these seemingly benign calls, rallying calls.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting, and thinking about, like you said, we're literally living in times where we're seeing what was written play out
Yeah.
as those who wrote it wanted it to. And again, to have to think that our parents made it so far. Why should in their lifetime they have to see things go back to how they were? They work so hard for us just to be where we are and to be, reliving this in real time. It almost seems a bit surreal. It really does.
And
It
like
really
Kamala
does.
Harris said during her campaign, "We are not going back. We're not doing
Mhm.
that." So there
Mhm.
is much work to be done, and I don't wanna diminish what we're up against because these times are dire. However, we've got the muscle memory for what it looks like to do democracy, to put this country on the track that it says, to live up to its ideals. So the battle for the Black mind serves as a reminder of what our elders and ancestors did in this context. So while you have Ware High School being shut down because it's under the control and rule of the state school board, in that same city, Lucy Craft Laney establishes the Haynes Institute, which is an all-Black, segregated private school. And Miss Lucy's school is just one of hundreds of examples of Black autonomous private schools that popped up all throughout the South. And this is something that is really the engine of the book, telling our stories of Black educators, especially Black women who, used what they had, the resources, uh, networks, and intellect that they had, and they not only taught in schools, they founded schools. They were educational entrepreneurs and educated generations of Black minds and created those pathways and pipelines where we got our college educations, where we earned our PhDs and masters and went on and did the damn thing anyway. And that's what I want us to remember through this book.
Phenomenal, and I'm glad you touched on that, about the importance of women. You open up the book with a powerful woman, Mary Smith Peake,
Mm.
who for nearly 20 years, in your book, you said she smuggled books and knowledge through Virginia's plantations at the risk of being penalized by either death or fines, and she became the first Black teacher of record, of a Freedmen's Bureau school. And so, Karita, I want to know here at Classes in Session, as a woman who is a leading voice in this space, in studying and also teaching Black history, Black culture, how important was it for you to highlight women in the battle for the Black mind?
It it is everything. Um, women, Black women are and always have been the unsung heroes of our educational freedom dreams. And it was important to reclaim that and to recenter that in the historical record. Um, it it can be lost upon us it can be lost upon us the contributions that the folks on the ground are doing. And what I mean by that is while it was often Black men who had the microphones, right, who were either serving as principals and administrators, who also had platforms to be leading the debates on the future of Black education. W.E.B. Du Bois being an example of that, Carter G. Woodson, Booker T. Washington. Those men had national and international platforms. But who was in them towns doing the work? Often, who were on the streets making sure that our Black babies got what they needed to be able to have access to the education that they were going to need to be prepared for society. It was often Black women educators who were developing curricula, delivering that curricula, building institutions, fundraising, advocating, creating organizations to mobilize our resources. And, those stories deserve attention too, because again, they are instructive. And in the case of Mary Smith Peak, when they say that like knowledge is power, if we're to believe that, and if the oppressors that be also believe that, then we know that the Black mind then and now is a matter of national security. So they did this work at great risk, at great personal risk, and they did it anyway. And they deserve our attention and our care and tenderness to sit with their stories and really reflect on that.
That was powerful. The Black mind is a matter of national security. Tell us a little bit more about that.
You know, there's a reason why the title is The Battle for the Black Mind and not the history of Black education or, what Black teachers did. It's because I quickly recognized, and you mentioned this took 8 years of archival research um, to do this story justice, and I thought when I started the process, I thought that I would be spending most of my time researching in the South. Well, no. I spent a significant portion of time in the archives of big philanthropies in New York, Connecticut, up in New England, and I'm talking your Rockefellers, your Carnegies, your Anson Phelps Stokes funds, um, and I learned what an interest everybody had in the Black mind, from white Northern industrialists who were interested in how to exploit this newly freed population of Black labor, white Northern missionaries who had intentions to deliver an education that would be in their image and likeness. Also, Southern whites who, under no certain circumstances, wanted African Americans to have access to any education. And the stakeholders that had the largest and most deepest vested interest in this topic, in this issue, were African Americans themselves who built their own schools, who made a way for themselves through education as the great equalizer. We understood that fundamentally because that right was denied to us. And therefore, I set it up as a battle because that's exactly what it was. If you think of a tug of war, instead of the rope going two ways, just think of like a octopus, right? Everybody had an interest and wanted to take over the Black educational system because they knew that's where the power was.
That's where the power was, and if it weren't where the power still is, there wouldn't still be such a struggle and fight against us.
Mhm.
Even now, when you think about it, you mentioned education being the great equalizer. Oftentimes we hear that HBCUs are in part responsible for helping to create the Black middle class.
Yes.
And you often highlight in your book some of the humble beginnings of HBCUs. And I thought what was of note, you mentioned about Tuskegee and shared that from afar, Tuskegee symbolized a form of Black self determination that felt revolutionary, and it was a lighthouse guiding the path to liberation.
Yes.
Dr. Karida Brown is here with us at Classes in Session. She's an author, sociologist, professor, the author of The Battle for the Black Mind. Dr. Karida, how are the values of HBCUs viewed today?
Mm, depends on who you ask. I will say this, HBCUs are our collective family heirloom. They are our inheritance for freedom in this country. What do I mean by that when I say they're an heirloom? Whether you are an HBCU alum or student or not, it's it's still a part of our collective. Um, um, it's still a part of our collective heirloom because these institutions are much more than a place to get an education. Yes, they do that, but historically, Black artists were not were not able they were excluded from the mainstream art institutions. Galleries would not show their works. Museums would not commission their works. Who was putting on Black art exhibitions? Often it would be HBCUs. The same goes for Black artists, Black writers and creatives. Our archives, for the most part, sit in HBCUs, and these institutions are a wellspring of our knowledge, heritage, and culture. How are HBCUs viewed today? That is the light in which I believe that every American should see them, and they are a deeply American story also. Going back to that great equalizer metaphor, HBCUs created a pathway for African Americans to um, uh, completely shift their socioeconomic status, their class status. They were the elevators that propelled us into the middle class, and they still are today. We know that the majority of Black doctors, engineers, to this day, astronauts, at some point have matriculated through HBCUs. Not all, but the majority. So without them, our our current success, our current, state would not look anywhere near what it is without the function of what HBCUs have provided us, and for that reason, we must protect our HBCUs at all cost. Now, Ashley, there are some who are right now actively making the argument that HBCUs served a purpose in the past. That purpose is no longer necessary, and therefore, there might be some question on the table about whether or not they should still exist, or at least in their form. But we know otherwise, and that is not even a conversation. That conversation is a slippery slope that we ain't having. We are not entertaining that because we know better.
Right. We know better. We're going to do better. You're exactly right. You're exactly right, Karita. Thank you for
Mhm.
pointing that out. And if we kind of look to before we get to college, looking at secondary education, obviously there were recently scores released for the nation's report card. And there were drops across the board, particularly post pandemic. And many media outlets deemed the NAEP scores either dismal and or disappointing. And
Mhm.
obviously, of note, white and Asian students tend to outperform their Black and Brown peers. But over the last decade, there's just been gaps, bigger gaps between higher and lower performing students, according to these results. Karita, where do we stand today in fighting for the battle of the Black mind in K through 12 schools and achieving true educational justice?
Mm. Where do we stand today? The battle continues. We are, if you think of a relay, and I say this in the book, the relay must be assured. Our elders did their work. Their work was to build these institutions, to advocate and fight for us to have access to education, and some of our elders and ancestors lost their lives doing that. The next leg of the relay were those young people who were supremely active and often in front of the leadership of the social movements that put Jim Crow in his grave and delivered us a Brown versus Board of Education. That was another leg in the relay and the work of a generation. It's our turn now. We hold the baton. Each generation's fight is different, and we are up against these inequities that you point to. Those statistics are real and are not to be ignored. And so we've got a systemic issue,
Mhm.
and an issue where we're in a culture war, where our own government is actively attempting to capture and dismantle our education system as we know it today. What I mean by that is particularly, let me name a few things for you. Um, Actively dismantling the Department of Education, that is the federal watchdog of for equitable for equitable delivery of education funds across the country, and to protect civil rights injustices that occur in schools. But it goes beyond that. It is book banning. It is banning certain types of curricula, a la critical race theory. It is erasing whole data sets that allow us to study and name inequity and to point to the factors that are contributing to that. It is attempting to get rid of our um, memory institutions like the Blacksonian. So there's a full frontal assault on our entire educational ecosystem. That is our fight. But at the local level, when it comes to our babies, okay, the fight is also, and I'll take a lesson from Lucy Craft Laney. If the government is not gonna do it, if the state is not going to do it, we must take care of our children's education. We must shore up the bag, and that's a part of what this work is going to be. So I ask everybody on this call, where are our Saturday freedom schools, our after school freedom schools? If our children aren't getting access to Black history in their schools right now, that's a fight that we need to be fighting long term. But in the right now, um, what institutional infrastructure are we setting up to ensure that we can deliver that to our children anyway, and not just our individual children, but our communities. Um, there are steps that we all can be thinking about taking, like how can we mobilize our resources to um, ensure that Black children, that the Black mind will have the conditions under which the next generation will be able to thrive and be nourished, and also have a strong sense of self, which is important to go out into the world.
You're right, a strong sense of self as we go out into the world. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Karita. As we wrap today, and again for our audience, this is Dr. Karita Brown's book, The Battle for the Black Mind. I'm curious to know, what do you want the public to take away from this, but more specifically, Black educators? What do
Mm.
you want them to take away from your book?
I want you to take away from this book that it is a history, a playbook, and a call to action. I leave 10 steps of what can we be doing right now, to fight this fight. So it is not just a book of struggle or success. It's posing these questions about today. And for Black educators, I want I want us all to remember our power. And we remember our power through our stories. So as you move through these books, I want you to fall in love with these Black women educators, with Lucy Craft Laney, with Charlotte Hawkins Brown, with Mary McLeod Bethune, Mary Smith Peak, and many, many others. Why? Because when we remind ourselves of our story and what we've done, it's empowering, and you remember that we too have that power to be the change that we wanna see. Black educators, we are on the front lines. Whether you signed up to be in a battle or not, guess what? We're here, and we can do it.
That's powerful. Black educators are indeed on the front lines. And you, again, have written a masterful history lesson, playbook, as you mentioned, call to action on how we can continue in the fight for educational justice, the battle for the Black mind. Karida, where can folks find out more about you and what you
Mm.
do and your book?
You can follow me on Dr. Karida Brown on any social media platform, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. And also, the book is available anywhere books are sold, online or in stores. And I really encourage you to go to your local Black owned bookstore and purchase a copy or send them an email. They will order the book for you and deliver it to your home because we've got to take care of one another.
We absolutely do. Supporting our locally Black owned bookstores to support Black authors. Love to hear that. Karita, thank you so much for being here at Classes in Session.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, to those watching, please share this episode. Please share this episode with family and friends, particularly the educators in your life. Or if you are an HBCU student who is an aspiring educator, this is also for you, this conversation, and as well as this book by Dr. Karida Brown. She's an award winning author, sociologist, professor, and author of The Battle for the Black Mind. So, again, thanks to everyone for tuning in. You can stay posted for the latest and greatest across Black Enterprise's social media channels and as well as our website, blackenterprise.com. For this episode of Class is in Session, I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and class is dismissed.
I am doubly honored to receive the Earl Graves Senior Vanguard Award named after Bee's founder. Mr. Graves was always a guiding light for me and many others. He always had advice, a kind word, and even a playful jab for me.
Coming here lifts my spirits because I know that no matter what happens around us, I think we have a chance to do some great things.
Networking is extremely important.
This is a conference I definitely will look forward to coming to.
Excellence is the base. That's the base. The goal is exceptionalism.
Anybody that is a business person needs to be here.
For more than 5 decades, we've had your back. Class is in Session, and Black Enterprise have everything you need to elevate your excellence.